Welcome to The Virtual Shift, a show looking at the seismic changes happening in healthcare with virtual care at the epicenter. Join me and my guests as we look at key cultural and policy shifts impacting how providers, payers, and patients connect, as well as how care is being reimagined both for today and the future. Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Tom Foley. You can learn more about this show by visiting the program on healthcarenowradio.com, and be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and the hashtag The Virtual Shift. We have a great guest on. We're going to talk about a topic that we normally don't talk about on the Virtual Shift, but it has great relationship to the topic. Our guest is Munther Baara. He's the Vice President of Product Strategy and Innovation at EDETEK. Munther, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Yes, the evolution of clinical trials and the clinical data management strategies is forever growing. And, there is, as you know, a virtual component to clinical trials. So I'm very interested in learning more about what you're doing, what EDETEK is doing, and where this industry is going.
Sure. I've been in the industry for almost, 35 years now. And there's a major shift in our industry. But I've been there for 35 years. I worked in a small CRO. I worked with pharma, started with the small biotech, and worked in major pharmaceutical companies like Wyatt, and which got acquired by Pfizer. And before I left Pfizer to join EDETEK, I was the head of new clinical paradigm, responsible for really implementing, considering the paradigm shift in our industry and trying to have a forward-looking in terms of how we will be conducting our clinical trials in the future. And so we worked on a lot of innovative ideas around e-source, e-consent, blockchain with drug supply and data donation, returning data to patients. EHR and e-source is very inclusive of collecting data outside of the normal ways of collecting data, and which was actually at the time, just before the pandemic, something that aspiration people only that was implemented with fewer studies. With the pandemic, that became almost the norm and skilled. So that's where I spend more life in my innovation. We'll talk more about this. I don't want to get into it right now. But that's my background in working basically with pharma. I joined EDETEK because I was part of multiple consortiums at Pfizer. We talked about industry solutions, and I felt I want to go join a software company that can help us implement this, not only for Pfizer, but implement it across the industry. With the idea is really helping the patients, the sites, and pharma. So it's kind of like shift the view from being the protocols and design studies to be sponsor specific to be patient site sponsor. So like look at the big, and regulators, of course, look at the big picture and make them the center of the clinical trial. Now you might say, well, what is different about EDETEK? And I will summarize it in a very simple way. EDETEK started in 2009 as a functional service provider for submission, for creating data sets called STTM based on the CDISC standard in order to enable you to submit your data, the SAS programming, etc. And as we grow, we saw that we're doing the same thing over and over. So we shifted this to become a product that we can share with the rest of the industry, right? So we automated the creation of the submission of the data. STTM, ADAM, TLF, basically we created all these automations, as well as we took it one step further, which we call the 4 Cs: connect, collect, conform, and consume. So we created these adapters with all these vendors that we have out there in the industry, because the study starts and they all in silos and it takes forever. You create a new digital endpoints, it takes forever. So you do connect and collect from day one, and now you're seeing the data all in one place. It conform it to one industry, to the standard, whether it's our standard or any industry standards, and then we allow you to consume it immediately. It's almost in what I call a near real time, which is dependent on where we bringing the data from the disparate sources in order for you to really review the data. So that gives you, and that's a paradigm shift for our industry, because a lot of the study coordinators, program managers say, my study is good, 6 months down the road, we're still green. Once they do the first interim analysis, or the DMC meeting, the data monitoring committee, and they start to see the data together, because an army gets together and bring all the data, and they start to see all different things, that they probably enrolled the wrong patients, etc., protocol deviation here. Everything goes almost from green to yellow to red overnight, basically. So we bring this to life to make you make proactive decisions.
So yes, in clinical trials, there's many different silos of data. EDETEK seems to be that new hub that plays the HIE, Health Information Exchange, if you will, aggregates it and normalizes it in order to better understand what is actually happening in the clinical trial as the clinical trial is being engaged, right? As opposed to your point, hey, weeks later, everybody gets together, starts to share their data, and realizes that there's things that were missed, and maybe impacts the credibility of the trial in and of itself. Is that fair? Your position?
Yeah, so that's one aspect. That's the connect and collect. We're almost like the glue, basically, right?
Yes.
That brings all data into one place. And the difference, there's the huge difference, okay, is it's point and click. There's no coding involved. A lot of times when people build connectors, or, when a pharmaceutical company or a client optimize their platform, it's optimized for 2, 3 systems. But we know in clinical trials, there's a huge complexity now when conducting clinical trials. Think about COVID. We almost conducted a phase 3 study from day one, rather than going through a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And that created a huge complexity there for the design of the trial, what have you. But if we take a step back, think about, we started with Weber, right? Collecting the
Yes.
data.
Exactly.
Then we said, all right, let's get more advanced. We scanned the images and somebody is typing them. And then we created the electronic data capture, that people just typing directly. There is no CRF by transforming data from the patient chart. And then we start introducing the e-consent, like let's have an electronic consent. And then the EBRO, patient reported outcome. So the patient now are entering the data themselves. Sensors with the digital endpoints. Think about, from the patient perspective, one of the things now we introduced as a digital endpoints, you used to have to go to see your doctor, and if you can't walk, your care provider, your care, your mom, your dad, your wife, or significant others will have to take you to the clinic just to do a 6 minutes test, whether in your walk, whether you're walking straight, or or what have you. And now we move that to your iPhone or to the mobile device, and you basically can take the endpoints to say, and the measurement of that, and you can automatically send it to your doctor, and you can have a virtual visit. So that's the paradigm shift that we introduced. But with that, we need to be able to aggregate the data, make it readily available, so all the stakeholders, the patient, the site, the sponsor, can see the data all in one place. And that's important, and that's what we really bring the data to life with our glue, the hub, as you said, the data exchange, as well as the ability to make proactive decisions and have the insight for it, basically. So. Yeah.
So you're changing the paradigm of how you're collecting the data, and it obviously will impact the research associated to this clinical trial. So tell the audience a little bit more about how this might accelerate a clinical trial, how it might make the efficacy of the study better, and ultimately produce a better pharmaceutical at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is a very good question. So if you think about this, now you're collecting all the data, right? And if you think about the explosion of the design of the study with the number of endpoints, whether the primary endpoint, secondary endpoint, or exploratory endpoints, and we resulted in more procedures the patients need to do. So now you have a massive amount of data that you need to deal with. So what matters is the curation, and also one of the key things is the quality and the compliance of this data and the integrity of this data. So you want to make sure the data is of high quality, consistent, and basically you can all look at it in one place, right? So now, how do you bring all that data together? It's what matters. So now you can create, for example, validation rules that allow you to look at different data points from different data providers, which you didn't have the ability before because they all separate. So think about
Right.
this. So you have an ePro, and you basically say, when I took the medication, I was fatigued. And so you score it as 5. You go to the site, you forget about this. The investigator asks you, how are you doing? I was doing well, right? But we could have a validation rule that looks at the ePro data, look at the EDC data, and says, well, the patient on day X said this, and when you visit the doctor, did not report any adverse events. And so now that could basically alert the investigator to ask more questions about what really happened at that point, because otherwise this will be missed as a result of that.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. So you're collecting a lot of data, obviously, and you're aggregating it and synthesizing it. I have to imagine whether now or in the future AI is going to play a role in clinical trials. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, big time, big time. This is a paradigm shift. And I think not only EDETEK, across the whole industry, we're seeing different models, but we think we gonna change the way people interact with the data as really we introduce more and more AI tools. Now, a lot of times we want to make the invisible visible. Let me put it this way. And
Yeah,
so a lot of
that's a
times,
great way of putting it, by the way, because
yeah,
again, with a lot of data and several different sources of that data, everybody has potentially a different interpretation. AI can at least dig into it more so than what anybody else can dig into it by the naked eye, if you will. So, yeah, tell us more about that.
yeah. So because I mean, let's think. I want to come at it from different angles. So angle the data and resources. I mean, with the pandemic, the resources at the sites were limited, and we lost a lot of people because of the virtual visits, etc., and it becoming more and more problematic. Can AI help? Basically, as a result of all this, and everybody now we're seeing sponsors and vendors are getting into the business. We're going to see some actually two forces. One, how long the sponsors will continue to build their own AI model, and whether the interests of their leadership team will continue to fund this from a budget perspective. At one point, they'll probably have to give up and use some of the vendors that are out there, right? Because when the new kid in the block, everybody get interested, money is pouring in, but at one point there is that budget is going to dry out basically.
Right.
So and vendors usually have more exposure and focus as a result of that. But so that's one aspect. The second aspect is, how do you interact with the data? So think about this. You get data from these different sources, and you use tools. We have great data visualization, don't get me wrong, that you can do point and click, and you see the study profile, you look at the trends there, it takes you to patient profile, it shows you data for, like, for example, oncology patient. Over 3 years of data in a single screen, really nicely designed to focus on 1 to 2 clicks, really, to achieve any goal you want. You can see issues related to that. You can look at the audit trail. You can review the data within the system. The system will tell you any new data came in. It highlights the cell that changed, updated since the last time you looked at the data. But still, you need to click and you need to go here. And if you forget to click here, and we have alerts, etc. Now you could come into the system and say, tell me the health of my study in English, right? Tell me the health of my study. Tell me, is there any adverse events were missed in the study? And the system will automatically go and look. The LLM will look basically, and the agent will look and say, okay, I see this patient took medication XYZ, but no adverse events were reported. But I see other patients when after the study drug were administered, were basically took the same medication, but 2, 3 adverse events were reported as a result of that. Did the site miss to report these adverse events? So now preactively we can capture this. The same thing, is there a serious adverse events, or there's a pattern of adverse events that need the immediate attention of the medical monitors? Because now we're taking this continuous data that we're collecting from connectors, as well as the APRO data and the ADC, and we start to see patterns so that we can easily predict early on for the good of the patient if there's any safety issues that we need to immediately alert basically the site or the sponsor. So that's one use case. We can talk about the quality of the data from data management, because that's important for AI. We can identify gaps of the data as a result of that, and that immediately alerts data management, and they can basically work with the site in order to correct it, like proactively, rather than having to wait months down the road to correct that.
Yeah, how does one normalize that data, right? You have discrepancies in the data that is discovered. How do you normalize it and make sure that you're removing the right pieces, if you will, to correctly, so that the efficacy of the program remains intact? So let me back up. So in an EHR, I have an EHR background. So in an HIE background. So we have this probabilistic matching algorithm, and you have 2 patients, right? One is 47, one is 74. This is a true story, by the way. And one EHR would say, "Hey, the younger one is false," and so we're going to throw that out. When in reality is that it could have been father-son. Right. And yeah, you still want to separate them, but you don't want to toss it's subjective, right?
Yeah.
And what you're doing with the data. So how do you remove that subjective nature in how you normalize that clinical trial data?
Great question. So if you let me try to take it from a different angle and see, hopefully that will answer your question. Data quality is important, right, for us, and making sure we have the correct data. And I won't say we'll remove data. We'll basically collect the data clean before we collect it. That's like proactively collect the right data. But sometimes data comes in, as you said, wrong age, or one attribute was removed. How do we correct this? So one of the things that we build over the years of experience we have in the industry, what we call validation rules and edit checks. And those are also they get applied at the study when the study starts. So it looks for discrepancies between the different endpoints, and then it alerts the data manager to basically, and the sites, to say, are these data correct, etc. But it can also learn as it goes from these edit checks whether they are correct or not, or they being inconsistent, right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect, which I think really key, is in our industry, people look at data in silos. So when they look at this data to clean it up, they're looking at EDC alone, they're looking at the APRO alone, they're looking at the digital, whatever is the connectors in separately, or central labs separately. In our platform, we bring everything together and we cross-reference all of this. And there's zero coding involved in this. We call this flexible validation rules. That's what empowers us to produce things like from day one, rather than taking months to create, to write code and somebody to validate them and check them and what have you. On top of this, what we've done, we took an extra step to become a certified EPIC vendor as well, which enable us to extract data directly from an EPIC system with what we call like two-way certification for us with the EPIC system, and also additional certification for us from the site that allow us basically to connect to the system, to the clinical research module, and be able to extract data. Because that's where a lot of the errors happen. Because the study coordinator is like a swivel chair. Study coordinator sits in one screen, looks at your EPIC system, and then switch over, start typing over here. Think about
Mm-hmm.
all the local labs data that are in that system and how many typing that happens. We solve that problem. Actually, we extract all the local labs from the EHR system and then move it directly to the EDC system, basically, or whatever is the downstream application that within your system. And that's by SCDM surveys, that's almost like exceeding 70% of the data are electronic now. So it's no longer it's that paper based, right? And local labs is a major contributor. So that there is the width and the depth. From the depth perspective, more than 70% of that data is coming through eSource, basically.
Interesting. It is interesting in the EHR world how sometimes interoperability is difficult. As you know, we've been at this for 13, 14 years.
Yes.
And you're in pharma world, you're taking this interoperability almost to a new level, frankly. And I would have to imagine relative to the way in which you manage data is a significant contributor to obviously the quality of the study in and of itself. I'm curious, you and I actually have a similar background. I actually didn't work for Wyeth, but Wyeth was one of my customers back in 2000. I worked on the Effexor and some other brands
Oh, wow, of
on the
course.
marketing side. So it's
Yeah.
interesting you said that. But nonetheless, at the time, doing a clinical trial was $600,000, $700,000. We wish it was $1,000. So
Millions, you mean, right?
millions. Yeah, sorry. So, but the point is that millions of dollars and 8, 9, 10 years of investment to take a drug to market. How do you think what EDETEK is doing now accelerates the ability to bring a drug to market faster with greater efficacy?
Yes. So three things that we always keep in mind. One of the things we called our platform conform, and really it's about conformance with compliance. So from the get-go, we build that compliance into it. So think about HIPAA, think about GXP, good clinical practice, basically
Mm-hmm.
Part 11 compliance from an audit trail, privacy, security, confidentiality of the data. That's key. So, but also we're looking for speed and scalability and quality as well, right? In order to help the industry to expedite the approval of the drug or actually to kill a drug. So if it's not going to work, we need to quickly, because we don't want to subject the patients to this, right? That's the key. And so if the drug is not working, let's cancel the study right away. So those are the tools we're building from collecting data on real-time basis, making it available for the different stakeholders to make key decisions, proactive decisions and insights in order to make and take those key decisions, basically. Now, for the successful one, we want to optimize. And this is what our tool allows us to do that. Because we do all this cleaning and make the preparation of the data, then they can make quick decisions and prepare data for submission early on, basically in the study. On top of this, there's the introduction of other things that are happening. We want to try to have less patients in the study to get it for the successful approve. So you think about the real world data, real world evidence, which enable us to potentially create a synthetic arm to avoid having maybe placebo patients. If you're really sick, you don't want to get a placebo patients, right?
Right.
It impacts the life of patients, and as an industry, we always struggle with that, because that's what the randomized studies require to have a placebo patients, but those patients potentially are dying, and
Yes.
that's a problem. And so that's where the synthetic arm can help us basically, and from that perspective. So you take the synthetic arm, you take like things we added in the industry, what we call risk-based monitoring. You don't have to visit the sites and check every single data points. You can identify those KRIs, key risk indicators, and then remotely be able to deal with it. As an industry at large, right? As an industry at large, or even I would say humanity after the pandemic, we became a remote workers. And now people is having a hard time to go back to the office. And that's where I think the opportunity has been created for all of us to enable interoperability. Like me and you now having this call, everybody virtually having these calls and be able to conduct virtually, but with high quality compliance and speed to reduce the cycle time in order to get the drug approved sooner, basically. So without compromising quality.
Interesting. So we have a couple minutes left here. So tell us where this. You guys are doing some great things, by the way. I studied that. As you heard, I come from the pharmaceutical world. And I've been in health IT for the last 20-some years. But nonetheless, I've always kept a close eye on what pharma is doing because it's so critical to what the delivery of care to patients in the U.S. But tell us a bit more about. Where's this market going? How do you see clinical trials 2-3 years from now, based on what you're seeing today?
Yeah. So I think data interoperability, data connectivity is a must. We should not hopefully be talking about this, so it should be under the hood. We remove that complexity because without it, I don't think we're going to be able to have high quality studies. By the way, one of the things that actually impede progress in clinical trials is protocol amendment. If you make a protocol amendment, it takes 6 months to update the systems. In our system, it has zero impact on it automatically adjusts itself because it uses objects databases. I don't want to get technical, sorry, but that helps usually. And discoveries of protocol deviation. But now, 3 years from today, if we get standards, data connectivity, data interoperability, we're going to be collecting millions of data points. Think about your Tesla. Gigabyte of data every second probably that's being collected from all the cameras, etc. If you take this into the clinical trial and think about we're talking today about what we call large language model. Moving to large action model is where this is going to shift. What does that mean? Think about your Apple Provision Pro. It is connected basically to you. It is connected to everything around you. But it reads your eye and it can predict what you're going to do next. If you add this to your clinical trial and then basically attach it when you take the medication, the study drug, and see the kind of reaction the patient get, their body over 24 hours, that gives us a real precision medicine in terms how the patient are reacting to the study drug and the quality of life. I think directionally that's where we're going. Remove all these silos and create a seamless, frictionless user experience at the end of the day for the patient, the site, and then the sponsor and the regulators to hopefully make the right decisions to approve or disapprove the drug, basically.
Awesome. You guys are doing great things. Munther Baara, Vice President, Product Strategy and Innovation at EDETEK. You're always welcome on the program. I want to thank you for your time and for educating the audience on what's new in the clinical trial arena.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I really enjoyed the show.
That's today's shift. I appreciate the audience taking the time to tune in. If you missed part of today's episode, you can tune back in at the healthcarenowradio.com at the same time, 11 a.m. or 7 p.m. Eastern throughout the week. And be sure to check out the program page at thevirtualshift.co. As well, remember to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and follow the show's hashtag, TheVirtualShift. I'm Tom Foley. Until the next shift.